Hi, BookTube, and welcome to this. This is the final episode in a series of 3 vlogs, which have been taking a longer look at Adam Zamoyski's book, 1812, Napoleon's Fatal March on Moscow. Since we all read books in the same direction, or at least I think we do, maybe there are people who've read Zamoyski's book from back to front, or they've picked chapters at random, but I think it's safe to assume that most people will start at chapter 1, which was set in late 1811, talking about Napoleon's ambitions, and then it goes around almost to a full year at the end of chapter 25. So in effect, you live through a year. It's condensed into book time, but I think most avid readers, they get good at understanding book time as if it were real time. And as we are walked through, or maybe I should say marched through, the events of 1812, that year becomes an ordeal. We don't have to suffer exactly what the hundreds and thousands of soldiers and serfs and horses had to suffer, but Zamoyski makes sure we have details. And those details are painful reading. So today's vlog, yes, it's going to go to the bitter end, but quickly. And then I'm going to take a step back. I need to reposition us in the distance of the present day and share some thoughts about this deadly episode in European history. In this final vlog, I am not going to walk through the last 6 chapters as I've done before. Instead, I'm going to give a mental health warning. If you've seen the first and second videos, you already know the scale of suffering. I read chapters 19 through 25 more quickly than I read the previous 18, and that is because, I'll admit this, all I wanted to do was escape the horror, make it end. But there was more horror. Chapters 19 and 20 record some temperature statistics, which I'd like to share. November 9th, 1812, Smolensk, minus 15 degrees centigrade, 5 Fahrenheit. November 12th, 1812, Smolensk, minus 23.75 degrees centigrade, minus 10.75 Fahrenheit. November 30th, 1812, Pleshenitsa, minus 30 degrees centigrade, minus 22 Fahrenheit. It's almost impossible to believe that humans and horses were marching and bedding down out of doors in these temperatures with inadequate clothing and inadequate food. Every morning there would be dozens of men who just did not wake up. There would be sentries frozen stiff, still standing at their watch. Zamoyski quotes diaries and letters. They detail the effects of having to remain in the same clothing for weeks, of the injuries caused by gangrene and snow blindness, and the things which were done to ward off starvation I will not mention. Men were pushed to the point where survival overrides all cultural taboos, all boundary lines. On page 484, an officer who lived through it described 1812, and he wrote, "A horrible egoism had taken hold of my heart, and whenever my thoughts go back to that time of my life, I shudder at the moral degradation to which misery can make us stoop." That was the health warning. If you can manage to read through the horrors, what you also do find are accounts of selflessness, of camaraderie, and heroism. They seem small scale, they seem fewer in quantity, and maybe that was the reality. Or maybe Adam Zamoyski held back from describing too many accounts of good behavior because he didn't want critical opinion to claim that he was defending Napoleon, or glorifying the conflict, or sugarcoating the ugliness of total war. I wouldn't want to do any of those things either. Yet it amazes me that anyone had the capacity to care, to restrain themselves, to continue sacrificing. I may be the only one who does this, but I'll take a gamble that I'm wrong. Does anyone else ever imagine themselves in these sort of extreme situations, starving, freezing, witnessing multiple deaths every day, day after day? Does anyone ever wonder how they would behave? I'm reminded of a really disturbing quote from Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Auschwitz, from his book Man's Search for Meaning. In fact, it was so disturbing that I haven't been able to go back to that book and read beyond that passage. Frankl said about the concentration camp inmates, "On the average, only those prisoners could keep alive who, after years of trekking from camp to camp, had lost all scruples in their fight for existence. They were prepared to use every means, honest and otherwise, even brutal force, theft, betrayal of their friends, in order to save themselves. We who have come back, by the aid of many lucky chances or miracles, whatever one may choose to call them, we know the best of us did not return. And yeah, I'm still not ready to keep reading Frankl. Apologies, everybody, I really needed that edit. But I want to contra what I just read from Frankl with this passage from page 486 from Zamoyski's book. Another powerful motive was the shared sense of solidarity within a unit, and men from the same regiment often saved each other from the brink. Quote, "In the midst of those horrible calamities, it was the destruction of my regiment which caused me the keenest pain," wrote Colonel de Fezensac of the 4th Infantry of the Line. "That was my real, or rather my only suffering, as I do not consider hunger, cold, and fatigue to be such. As long as health holds out against physical hardships, courage soon learns to scorn them, particularly when it is supported by the idea of God and the promise of another life. But I admit that courage would leave me when I saw succumbing under my very eyes friends and companions in arms who are rightly termed the Colonel's family. Nothing binds people together like a community of suffering, and indeed, I always found in them the same attachment and the same concern as they inspired in me. Never did an officer or a soldier have a piece of bread without coming to share it with me." According to him, this was so throughout the Third Corps, the remains of which were still marching in orderly fashion to the sound of the drum. There were plenty of instances of commanders remaining with their men. Both Prince Wilhelm of Baden and Prince Emil of Hesse were exemplary in this respect. For my personal commendation, I am going to mention Marshal Michel Ney, the man Napoleon called the bravest of the brave. He led the last regiments to leave Moscow, and he had to take his troops across the Dnieper River in order to avoid being overwhelmed by Russian forces being led by Miloradovich, and he only ended up facing the enemy again on the north bank, led by Platov. Ney moved his men throughout the night, walking through knee-deep snow, and he managed to rendezvous with Napoleon 24 hours later at Orsha. That is really all I want to say about the book. It does mean that I'm leaving out the final horror, the chaos and the pointless loss of life which took place from 6 December 1812, when Napoleon left the remainder of his army behind at Vilna, which is now Vilnius in Lithuania, while he fled across the river Niemen and out of Russian-held territory. That's the subject of chapter 23. In my description box, you'll find a link to a 2015 article in Forbes magazine about the accidental discovery of a mass grave in Vilnius. It's about 3,000 Napoleonic soldiers. Analysis of the remains reveals most of the dead were in their 20s, with high levels of nitrogen isotopes in their bone matter, which can be indicative of a few things, but the only one which makes sense in context was that the men had experienced, and I'm quoting from the magazine here, prolonged nutritional stress. That article will be my recommended reading. I'm also leaving out, though maybe I shouldn't, chapter 25, called The Legend, in which Zamoyski remarks on the lingering power of Napoleon's aura, his romantic reputation that carried on after 1812. It's evidence of how badly people want to believe that some humans are better than human. But it's also depressing, and I think you now know that that's what you're going to take on in reading this book. Regarding the material that comes at the end of Zamoyski's book, I think you'll be impressed by the extensive sources, including 4,007 primary sources and 161 secondary studies. I will not forget the impact of this book. And I won't forget Zamoyski's writing style, because he had a certain narrative flair. You don't often find it in nonfiction. And yet I don't feel that came at any cost to the author's objectivity or his attention to detail. After a suitable break, I would like to read Zamoyski's follow-up book about Napoleon's defeat, ultimately, and the Congress of Vienna. And that is the vlog done. I suppose the only other work of nonfiction that I would like to read in preparation for rereading Tolstoy's War and Peace would be a biography of Tolstoy himself, a good one. That's going to need to wait until I can buy books again, which is fine by me because I honestly need a break from this subject matter. Thank you so much, everybody, for checking out this video. I need to go catch up now on all the Voxer messages that I've let pile up regarding the Faulkner in August challenge. But look out for another video from me at the weekend. And in the meantime, please, everybody, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.